Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest in our Coach webinar series. My name is Brett Gorman, and I am the Director of Coach Education. We're very excited to be bringing you a preview for a training session that is going to be at 2021 USRowing Virtual Convention. For those of you that haven't been getting the email blasts, we are going fully virtual again for convention, just for safety purposes. We do hope to at least do a hybrid next year, if not going back to fully in person. But for convention, we've really worked hard to create some really great programming on the skills that coaches need today. We're really focusing on what are some of the newer things that maybe coaches didn't have to be concerned about 10 years ago that now we have, that we really need to put in the forefront of our minds when coaching our programs. We're also really focusing on kind of the neck up approach to training and new innovations. And we're very, very excited to be bringing imagery coaching to USRowing. I want to introduce our two primary panelists, Joanna Grover, who is a co-founder of Imagery Trainer and is a master's rower here in the US, and then Karol Nedza, who is the director of Coach Ed for Imagery Coaching. We have sent a couple of our level 3 coaches to this training. We've been fortunate enough to be granted a few spots for that. And so we are also joined with Carrie Hughes, who is one of our level 2 instructors and a level 3 grad who recently went through the training. So at one point, I know Karol and Joanna are going to be asking her to speak about her experience so that everyone can learn more about it. But again, this is a preview. This isn't the training. This is what is it? How can it be applied? How is it different from visualization? I do want to let you know that there is a portion where we have some small group work and probably just a little bit after the intro. I'm going to be inviting everyone to come on as panelists, where actually you can have your camera on and you can participate. If you do not want to participate in the group activity that's going to be 8 minutes long, simply don't click on that and you'll just simply get an 8-minute break while we're in the middle of the presentation. But they do want to do a little bit of small group work, and so we will be doing that. So I will be inviting everyone to come on as panelists. I simply ask that you mute so that we don't interrupt the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna and Karol. Welcome.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. We're so delighted to be here. And for Karol, I'm in Miami, but for Karol, he's in the UK. So it's midnight. So I'm very grateful to have such a great team. And we're really delighted to have worked with you, Brett, and great coaches like Carrie and Malcolm. We are brand new in the US. This is really some of the people on this call, you're being exposed to something that really has not been part of our system of education and how we train coaches or athletes here in the US. Tons of study in the UK, but it's brand new. So we're delighted to have partnered with USRowing and the Harvard Institute of Coaching. And I just want to invite Karol to say a few words before we go into our presentation.
Thank you, Joe. I'm obviously very excited to be here and to talk to you guys. Myself, I come from a personal training background, but I've also wrote for UCL in UK. And yeah, I'm just excited to share this with you guys. As Joe said, this is all very brand new, especially in US, and it's one of the very first things we offer in such a format. So I would say without further ado, we would get the slides done.
All right. So little background, I was the first person in the US to be trained in this imagery method, functional imagery training. I ventured over to the UK when I read about it and saw just how much research was behind it. And then one of the team there reached out to me saying, do you want to write a book? So I'm really excited to announce to you today that we have officially signed a contract with a great publisher, Hachette Publishing, to publish our book. So that just happened today. So again, you guys are sort of in on the ground floor. We are very passionate about what we do. My background is as a social worker and as a coach. All right, so should we go to the next slide? Okay, Karol, this is you.
So what we want to share with you today is what Brad talked a little bit about, is the preview of our method and what we do and where we come from. Our approach is all based on scientific evidence that we produced over the last, well, here in Plymouth over the last 10 years, but in general, is the science of the last 20 years, at least. And the second outcome of today, we want to kind of show you the difference between visualization and imagery, and what it means and why sometimes it just seems very similar, but actually in practicality and applied world is very different. And also tell you a little bit about how our approach can produce the impact through consistency adherence with the athletes, and hopefully share with you to what degree we can help with that work. And finally is sustaining the motivation over the whole season, over the whole cycle of training up and becoming the best athlete we can.
Right. So I always like to tell stories, and we start with a sort of a common, there's some common themes in here, but this is based on a client that we've worked with. We changed the name to protect the identity. But Henry is our case study. He's 22 years old. He's a rower struggling with qualifying times. He's done it before, but recently has had a hard time. Some days he's top of his game and is motivated. Well, the motivation is not an issue, but he's been struggling to get consistent in hitting the world-class times. So he sometimes uses imagery, but without any formal guidelines. So this is sort of a typical athlete who would come to us, or whose coach would seek us out. And Jonathan Rhodes, who's not on the call with us tonight, but who's the co-founder with me, has worked with a number of Olympians and elite forces in the military to help them with things like motivation over time.
So one of the first things we want to identify is what problems do the athletes come to us with? And obviously in this case study, we very quickly identified problems such as mindset, mindset within the training, within the sports, and within the competition and performance. Of course, team dynamics, any issues, lack of consistency reflects on the whole team and the boathouse and everything else. So of course, there is a social aspect, in this case, the team dynamics. Consistency, of course, athletes want to perform at the top of the level all of the time. And as we learn from this case study, it's problem of delivering the same performance over and over again. So all of those three things then also result in athletes' poor mental health, as the strain, the stress, and the timeline as well, as it's not something that maybe happens once, but it's something that happens periodically over the long period of time, which can then affect the athlete's mental health. So that's something that we want to be aware of as well in this case.
Okay. So this was a solution that occurred really over 4 months of training this athlete, Henry, to use imagery. But it really, we begin, and this is a little bit of planting a seed, and I'm gonna ask Carrie to talk a little bit about this maybe. But we tap into motivation, intrinsic motivation, not external motivation from parents, from others, from, you know, that, but really internally, what's driving the athlete, what's driving the student. To do that, we use MI, which is short for motivational interviewing. It's a technique that has been studied for a long time now, so there's a lot of evidence behind it. The summary of it, I think Carrie and Karol would agree, is we don't begin by telling someone what to do. Yeah. So also with Henry, it was and with our athletes or executives, it's thinking bigger, values, life goals, purpose. What we find is that people can really get in a tunnel and tie their identity, their self-worth up in achieving that Olympic time or that medal. And it can have a significant impact on mental health. So bigger picture is, and that perspective is key, as it was with Henry. We teach imagery as a skill. Imagery is a muscle. And if we use it, we'll get good at it. So even if somebody struggles with it in the beginning, they stick with it. I myself struggled with it. And I find now it's just become very natural. We use imagery as preparation at choice points. The average human decision is made in a 2-second window. And we're more likely to do what we did yesterday, today, even though we think we're starting fresh, but we are creatures of habit. So we teach people to apply imagery at these choice points. Do I hit the snooze button or do I get out of bed, right? So if they use imagery and that imagery ties into their values, goals, and purpose, then we're going to create a little bit more of a window. It goes from a 2-second window to a 5-second window. And the decision that they make is going to be tied into what's driving them, what their values are. One of the fascinating things I've found as someone who came from the therapeutic world of mental health is that I did a lot of talking with people, talk therapy, but imagery really gets to emotion very efficiently, very effectively, and emotion is what changes our behavior. So that's, again, this is just sort of like we're planting some seeds. We'll get into it in the conference, and if you do want to be trained in it, we are doing training in January, but it's really fascinating how it just didn't work for this one particular athlete, but how it works with all of the different areas we work with, corporate America, the military as well.
So what we would like to do now is kind of switch the roles. And switch the roles, and instead of us just talking, we'd like to invite you into the breakout rooms and allow you to answer this one simple question in the groups. How do you use imagery? So you as a coach, you as an athlete, what do you do and how do you use it? And feel free to chat to everyone else in the group and trying to see if everyone has got the same experience or whether it's different.
So Carol and Joe, I messaged you both about this. So it seems like only 1/3 of the people accepted the panelist invite.
Okay.
So I think my recommendation, if you're okay with it, is to just ask people to put it in the chat and keep everyone together, if that's
Cool,
okay with you.
that.
And
Yeah.
those that said they did want to be promoted, I'm going to go ahead and move them back to attendees.
Okay, that works.
So
Wonderful.
I don't know if you want to provide more or ask Carrie. Carrie can talk about maybe.
Well, Carrie, if we ask her, she's going to give it away, right?
Oh, I was saying like her pre-training before she did the training, but that's up to you. It's your
okay, cool. No, Carrie, do you want to say something about that?
It was so interesting. Obviously, that I was fascinated for all 5 days that we came together and did the training. And I think one of the things that really resonated with me, what we talked about is, I think John was talking about, especially this generation, that they have all the information in the world, in their phone, at their fingertips, and that to really get to people, we're going to need to tap into, like you were saying, their feelings, their desires, their experiences, and tie that in to and have them figure out what motivates them, how to get to their goal, and that we're guiding them as opposed to telling them. And I think, for me, that, like I said, that really resonated, because that's what I tended to do. If someone came to me with a problem, I tried to fix their problem with the information that I had found through my own experiences that I was attached to, but I was giving that to them without their ability to attach. And so, you know, using a lot of this kind of imagery, tapping in, I always think of the emotion, you know, grabbing that emotion to attach it, that has really helped me be able to have a better guideline to help. And I think that kind of ties it in for me, that for, you know, those tools, that they're able to walk away with that ability to hold that feeling image they with, not the image with.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Brett, do you want to read out some of the things that people have said?
So far, it's crickets. Come on, people in the chat. I see some of you coaches that have done level 2 virtual with me. I know you know how to use the chat. I'm looking at you guys. I see you, Paul. I see you. Use the how do you currently use imagery
Or
in your coaching?
maybe people don't use imagery, right? Maybe that's a consensus. Do people use?
No. Does anyone use imagery? There we go. All right, here's one. I've used it with athletes when they are injured, which Joe was kind of your introduction, if I'm correct.
Yeah. I the way I came back to rowing, because I rowed in college, is I had fallen from a horse in an equestrian accident, and I shattered my shoulder pretty badly, and it was extremely painful. As an athlete, it's really hard to be injured because it kind of takes away your identity, that belonging, working out with others, that sense of being strong. And I just hit a wall, a personal wall. And that's one of the reasons I went to be trained in this. I was like, well, maybe it could help me. So funny story. I don't know if Vladdy or Elaine are on the call, but I had done an imagery exercise where I imagined that I could bend the oar. And the next day, and I don't know, I usually don't have, you know, an issue with equipment, but the next day I was rowing in a quad, and the oar, my oar on the left arm, which is the one that I had broken my shoulder, I broke that oar, split it right in two. So became sort of a legend in my quad that, you know, I had some sort of superpower. And I always promised Vladdy, the coach at in Miami, that I will use my superpower for good and not for some sort of sinister thing.
Well, it's getting a little more active.
Okay.
So one coach says, I ask, quotes, can you picture that in your head, what I just described, end quote. Saying that to their athlete. Another one, I'm not actually sure what you mean with imagery, the term. Oh, so good. Hopefully we'll answer that as we go. And then to your Paul here, I try to get my athletes to see who they would like to be, what they would like to accomplish.
Okay, great.
Yep.
All right, so this is going to be really interesting then, because a lot of people, it sounds like they're using some form of tapping into imagination or the ability to picture something. But imagery may be really sort of a new concept in terms of how we apply it. So Carol, do you want to go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think the important thing here is to distinguish between imagery and visualization. I'm going to do the first part of this slide, and then Karol, since he has such a lovely voice, he's going to walk you through a imagery experience. If he stays awake, keep drinking your coffee, Karol. Okay, so imagery is it taps into all 5 senses, right? And the research is, and the data shows that the more effectively we can do this, the greater the impact on performance and outcome. Why? Because the greater we get at imagining something using all the senses, it's almost as good as doing it. So as you practice this, and you want to ask your athletes, not just what do you see or can you picture yourself, that would be visualization. The image of, I mean, it's confusing. But visualization is just using the visual sense. Imagery is what do you hear, what do you smell, what do you taste, what do you feel. Imagery taps into emotion, and it has the ability to sort of, for the brain, if we were doing a brain scan of somebody imagining doing something using all their 5 senses and actually doing that, it would be so close to similar areas of the brain lighting up that unless you were a brain specialist, it'd be hard to determine who is doing it and who is really vividly imagining doing it. So it's a very powerful tool. So Karol, you want to lead them through?
Absolutely. So what we would like to do now is just give you a little preview of what our method is about. And the very first thing we try to do with our athletes, with people we train up, and what we're going to do is I want you to close your eyes or pick a spot somewhere in your room which you can focus on. And I want you to imagine yourself standing on the side of the pool. And I want you to pay attention to all the surroundings around you. Is it public pool or your private pool? Can you hear anything around you? Is the noise of the water? Maybe of others? Can you smell anything? Are you feeling cold? Are you warm? What's the feeling on your skin? I want you to take a few steps and get to the edge of the pool. Imagine yourself taking a big breath in. And dive in head in. And I want you to imagine how the water feels like. How does your body feel there? How's your mental feeling? Can you hear anything under the water? And whenever you're ready, you can surface and come back to us. So that was a multi-sensory imagery. We try to focus on everything in terms of smell, hear, the internal feelings, but also proprioception. So you taking the steps was another sense that we could incorporate into your body movements. And this is why I was trying to encourage you to think about different senses throughout this minute-long presentation, really. How were your experiences? Would you guys mind sharing in the chat? Interesting. So the encouragement to imagine things can bring very almost random situations, maybe somewhere where you haven't been for a while, or maybe somewhere there you don't always go, or vice versa. You could go somewhere that you go every week, for example. Okay, so it was easy to feel the water, so that's good. So the senses were very strong. Taste the water. I'm not sure if I would test I would like to taste the water in my public pool. I hope your report is much nicer than mine. Okay, so calling on the sense of smell was a little bit more difficult. And normally what we notice is the senses are not equal in the matter that one of them was going to be much, much stronger. Hence why so many people call imagery visualization, because they focus on the stronger sense which we can bring into our mind, which is just putting the image in our heads. Was there any of the senses that struggled apart from the smell?
So did you see what Kevin wrote?
Yes, I'm just following. Wow, so really all of the senses brought it together. And Kevin, would you mind sharing how did it feel to be in that situation?
Flood of happiness, right? Kevin says.
Yes, absolutely, the flood of happiness.
So that's what we're talking about with imagery. Elicits emotion, and emotion is what sustains motivation and shapes human behavior. As much as we want to think logically, we're really very illogical, emotional beings.
Absolutely.
Real feeling of happiness. Yeah, so that's a real driver, right? Emotions are what drive the bus. So that sense of happiness.
Absolutely. Catherine, you showed a very, very good point there, that it's the feeling that maybe we don't want to do. However, when we imagine it and we come a little bit closer to that realistic situation, it makes that a little bit easier for us to do the behavior. And again, we use imagery for those situations as well, to do things that maybe are not as comfortable. However, the feeling is going to be so rewarding that it's always worth to push further.
Great comments.
Yes, thank you very much, guys. That was wonderful to get all these insights into it.
One story I wanted to share, and this was before I went to the training, but it really, I think, highlights the ability of the imagination to activate the body. I was with my kids, and my oldest son was 12 at the time, and we were at a performance in New York of War Horse, and my son, my 12-year-old, is very allergic to horses, but there were no horses in the performance. Although in the middle of this first act, you begin to believe that they are horses. Even though you can see the people inside these horses, you start to believe, because of how they're moving and they're twitching, that they're real. And he squeezed my hand, and he couldn't breathe. He was developing hives, and he could not catch his breath. And I whispered to him, "Honey, they're not real. There's no horsehair here." And all his symptoms subsided. So that's the ability of the imagination to activate the body. So I found that so fascinating. And in my work with Karol and John, I see that over and over again. Like there's so much that we know from the 20 years of research, but we're still learning too. And this is an ancient, you know, I know that in like Qigong and other ancient traditions, they do believe that the most powerful engine is the human imagination. So should we move on, Karol?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you do this one.
Yeah, sorry, I just clicked too quickly. So as I said, we have been developing this method from over 20 years of research, and at the moment we're running projects with British Army, so looking at resilience for special forces. So the soldiers who already made it into the army have option to go now for the selection, and we help them with the adherence and resilience to push through that training and push through the selection. And the results are very, very promising. And at the moment, they are being published. So that's something that's ongoing. John also worked with climate coaching, so he works with one of the members of the parliament at British government and working with understanding and imagining the changes, and especially the climate changes and the importance of them. Jo, I'm sure she can tell us a little bit more about the performance coaching. However, working with KPMG and other corporations, and in terms of performance within the work environment. And recently we published a paper about ultramarathon runners. So 2 years ago, we approached open public. So there was anyone who was not at the moment active, but would like to start running. And we asked them if they would like to run a 5-kilometer race at the end of the year. Few people sign up. We had around 30 people who said yes to that. And then we asked the same group of people whether they would also consider running an ultra marathon at 2 years from the start line. And 15 of them were crazy to say yes. And we split them into functional imagery training and motivation interviewing. And the ultra marathon runners were 5 times more likely to complete races of 50 or 100 miles non-stop, of course. We're also observing quite a lot of evidence for the weight loss using imagery. So again, the long-term adherence and enhancing motivation for exercise adherence. So this is just sticking to the plan and completing that over and over on a weekly basis. So this is kind of where we are right now and where we are with our research. But as Jo said, this has been developed over the years and is being constantly developed. And we just, as you can tell, we are constantly publishing new domains of our research.
Karol, we did have a question come in, if I can feed that to you. Yeah, and this is from Kevin. It says, I'm definitely interested in how to use imagery in more challenging situations, such as 1,500 meters into a 2K. And there's that feeling that I'm not sure I can keep going. Can imagery training help at this critical point?
Jo, would you like to answer that one, or are you happy for me to go for it?
Sure. I think that this is one of the real strengths of what we do. We get people to, a lot of time with visualization, it's like positive. Imagine you're on the podium after, how do you feel, or picture your hero, whatever. But when we do imagery, we really want people to go to the pain cave. We want people to be in that situation, in their imagination, so that by the time they get there, they are totally ready for it. So as Karol was saying, like with the British Army, with the elite forces, they had a really high dropout rate the first year of the cadets. I believe it hovered almost, it was in the high 80s. And that was costing the military a lot of money and just fatigue, right? So with the intervention of imagery, the dropout rate was cut in half. And it was at those places, similar to that point in the race, when you just want to give in to the pain. It was at those choice points of fatigue that we introduced imagery. And that's what made the difference. So absolutely. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Karol.
Just summarizing what you based on is absolutely spot on. And what we want to do is we want to work with the client and figure out why is that purpose important, and then train you the imagery. So when the going gets tough, you can really have the automatic imagery when you need it. Your cue could be that it's time to go into imagery, but you because you're so trained in this, it becomes so much quicker and so much more efficient. So we can come into times when it seems like there's just no focus on it at all. And that was done with the ultramarathon runners, as they faced numerous times when they just wanted to drop out. They were cold, it was dark, they had to keep going, they were in pain, injuries were likely. Well, in simple words, they were suffering. and we could bring that trained imagery to go, you now can go into imagery, which took a few seconds, but it got them away from that, and it focused them on the bigger goal.
So it looks like we have a follow-up question to that. And this coach says, we have young female athletes who have fear about getting too far out of the comfort zone of training. How could imagery be used to conquer this fear issue?
So I worked a lot with fear as a therapist. I worked a lot with the panic attack. So fear is the sort of thing that the more you feed it, the worse it gets, but also the more you avoid it, the worse it gets. So when we work with, one of the things that when we're teaching people to image, if they have fear or some negative thought, we ask them to park it, which is very different than saying, stop doing that, right? If I tell you to stop thinking of a pink elephant, and I keep repeating, stop thinking of a pink elephant, stop thinking about it, it's gonna drive you crazy, because eventually that's all you're gonna think about. So we just have people like gently park something. Like fear is natural, it's not, it's an evolutionary survival skill. It's not something to be scared of, right? So just park it. And that's where, when you can tie into the bigger values, and that they know that with the imagery, they can find a little bit of a safer place mentally. That's been my experience. Karol, I don't know if you want to add.
It's just again summarizing a little bit. It's in the method we have two different imagery modes. We have something that is proactive, where we can focus on accessing this fear zone or the out of comfort zone. And as we spoke about earlier, jumping into the water is not a nice experience, but with the imagery, we managed to see that as a positive outcome, and that feeling was actually really positive, but we're still internally scared of it. But with imagery, we can get that comfort zone to become a little bit more, or the outside of the comfort zone can become a little bit more accessible. And as Joe said, and also reactive imagery. So when the things are tough and the fear appears, we also teach our athletes to park it, to get it stopped in that moment. This is the line. After that, those thoughts are behind us.
Yeah. And park is such a great thing, because you can invite them to visit it later. So the language we use is really important. I think someone asked another question.
Yes, there is one about resources.
Yeah, I was going to wait till the end, but we can go ahead and tackle it now. So yeah, Deb asked, do you have any resources, books, website with a small collection of imagery situations we can walk our athletes through so we can get more comfortable with our verbalization of imagery?
So the book is up and coming.
Oh, go ahead.
The book will be out probably in a year and a half. That's how long it takes to publish these days. But yeah, so they can go to our website, imagerycoaching.com. They can follow us on Instagram. We're going to be posting, we're brand new, so our Instagram is brand new. So please follow us as we build our following. And but we are going to be posting some really fascinating videos. And
you will be presenting more at convention. Come to convention.
Yes.
Come
John
to
will
convention.
Be here. Yeah. So go to convention. And John and Karol are running that. They're super talented in what they do. I think we want to pass it over to you, Carrie.
In what way, Joe?
Well, I've heard that you recently did some exercises from the training with meeting with your athletes individually. I don't know if you felt, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to maybe.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's pretty much been my days over the past week or so. But, typically at the end of the fall season, We would do check-in meetings that would be about maybe 20 minutes long. And it was like, I would just kind of ask a series of questions and, I don't know. I mean, they were exhausting, to tell you the truth. We'd get done with them, and I'd kind of be glad they were done. And we had our monthly meeting, and Karol and I were chatting about it. And, he gave me some great ideas about, again, tapping into their emotion, like letting them work through their goals, because that's so often what we do to try to, especially going into the off season, to get them kind of identifying what they want to be doing. And then hopefully that would give them the emotion and, motivation to work, on their own, instead of, since we aren't there as a team. And then, so just talking with Karol, and I told him how I was kind of dreading going to it, and it was so draining and everything. And so, we came up with basically just kind of, asking them, to see themselves in the spring, and what does that look like, and just being so very open-ended with it, and getting them to kind of just come up with what they see, and then working from there, being able to kind of help them walk towards what their goal is, but using the imagery of that to tap into the emotion and the feeling, and tie those together with the goal. And I remember after the first one, it was with one of our varsity coxswains. I just looked at her, I said, I'm so hyped up right now, I want to go. And she's like, me too. And I said, what are you thinking about now? And she's like, I am a dynamic force in my boat. And it was just, it was so interesting, because I think we talked for twice as long as we normally do, but it felt like it was half the time. And but it's because the whole conversation was really coming from her, and when she's really started getting into it and seeing the images that she was developing instead of what I was trying to give her, it just produced an energy in the room that was really exciting. And so, I've maybe done like 10 of them, and I feel energized after each one instead of drained. And so it's been really exciting.
Love that. Karol?
Yeah, that was great, and it was so nice to chat to Carrie about everything that, what you do with your athletes, and what conversations you need to bring to the table, and what are the outcomes that you need from those conversations. It is interesting to talk about that, and the language we use, and the motivational interviewing aspect of it is all kind of contributes to those conversations that are needed to be done.
Yeah, it's interesting how you describe this, one conversation can be kind of energy draining, and one is like energy gaining. And when you think about it, like when we're stressed, we do not become imaginative. We become like in survival mode. We're in what I call the lower elevations of our brain. We're in fight, flight, or freeze. And when you access imagination, which is in the hippocampus, it's like there's energy there, right? But under stress, the hippocampus shrinks. It physically shrinks. So you think about all the stress we're under, like COVID, and all the like inability to see relatives, inability to get around, economic and climate stuff, and like just like, and being a young person, there's so much like climate anxiety, which is one of the reasons why we're working on this. But there's just a lot coming at young athletes today, like a lot. And if we can shift from the amygdala, the lower elevations of our brain, to like the higher elevations, that's like a breath of fresh air. So that's the difference between that energy drain and energy gain. And it's really cool that you've realized that. I think one thing I also realized, and I want to hear from you, Carrie, is it's a lot less work, right? If we're always fixing things for people, we call that the writing reflex. We want to make it right, right? So we have to inhibit the writing reflex. And you're sort of handing over the keys to the student or to the client. So it's a lot less work for you. Did you feel that?
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that Carol and I talked about. And I remember, and I had written it down, you know, that when I would start the talk, and, you know, we would just kind of get relaxed, and I would say, you know, what do you see when you think of, you know, the spring? Where are you? What does it look like? And they would kind of then, you know, start kind of describing that. And then what, again, Carol, it was so wonderful. Then I would just say to them, so what does the first step look like? And then they would start brainstorming what, you know, what did they need to, you know, change in their lives or put into their lives over these next couple of months to make that image that they had just kind of figured out in their brain. Then, and you're absolutely right. So much of the work happens from them, and that's just a little bit maybe keeping people on track or throwing out the next question to get them to think and to walk further into the image. And, you know, that's what I was thinking when I was realizing how energizing it was that they were bringing things into the room, as opposed to me always trying to give more pieces of me to them. And so they were just really giving me pieces of them. And, you know, I think for everybody that I've talked to so far, it's been not only, I think, really good for the rowing part, but as we have been working to reestablish our team culture, it has really, for me, I felt like it's formed a bond that's kind of surpassed me in the coaching launch, them in the boat or at the boathouse, that we're sitting here in comfortable chairs, very relaxed with each other, having this great kind of give and take from them, and that it just brings us closer. And so before, and I think Carol could remember, I was feeling a little, not a little, but a lot worried and somewhat depressed about what the team was looking like culturally. I just even came home and I was saying to my sister, because I had talked with her about it too, I said, oh yeah, totally not worried anymore. Like, after these conversations, I feel like we're really building, as opposed, again, to me trying to figure something out.
I just love to hear that. That's just it's great. We haven't had a chance to catch up since that meeting 2 weeks ago. So yes, to hear that what we talked about has all worked out exactly how it was meant to be. That's brilliant news.
Yeah,
that's
fabulous.
Yeah, and what Carrie has also just touched on is that it's not just about imagery. Is the way we talk, is the way we communicate and talk about the goals and the barriers and, you know, the little steps that take you there. And that's all part of our approach, and also delivering this method to the teams. So it's not just always one-to-one, but it's also delivering it to the group or to the boat, whatever the setup is.
Yeah. So one of the things we do is, after you train with us, included in the training, so if you decide to go through certification with us, we have a year where you have supervision, like, so once a month, because we're building a community, right? And we want to honor the model because it works really well, and there's 20 years of research behind the way it's administered, and we want to be there to support the coaches and the professionals using this. And there's always questions, right? But the great thing is that because of all the research that's been done, we can be there. So for example, one of the participants was working with a student who suffered from depression, and the imagery was giving her more anxiety. So one of the things we know about folks who have depression, with their imagery, they tend to set the bar really high. So the image becomes oppressive. right? The image of what they want to achieve. And then that triggers more of the self feeling like low self-esteem, a little self-defeated. So we're mindful that if we're working with somebody who struggles with that, to really talk about it, right? Not setting the bar too high. Because then we are really kind of part of the syndrome, rather than really helping them understand. I mean, all of this is like helping people understand how their minds work. So we can, you know, and use this amazing tool of like imagination, which is, again, is going to reduce stress, expand your hippocampus, and get you closer to where you want to go, rather than sort of being on autopilot or in high stress mode.
There's some comments in the chat, but I don't see any questions in there to bring forth. Are we at this point now, or we're just down to questions, or is there more to present?
I think we're just down to questions, right, Carol?
Okay, great. Well, we have 8 minutes left. I said, like, please put, if you have right now, I don't have any fresh ones. Some people were kind of asking, you know, we were feeding them as we were going. If you have any final questions, just a reminder from what I said at the beginning, this is simply a preview of some of the work that's going to be done at convention. And then, you know, the greater training that they do that Carrie has recently gone through. So this was meant to just be a taste. If any of you are frustrated that you don't have all of the answers right now.
Yeah, we want you frustrated so that you like chew on that.
It's
and
a tease. It's a
Yeah.
tease. But I think we'll go ahead and give another minute and see if any questions come in. And if not, you know, we'll let Carol go to bed.
Yeah, Carol, trooper.
So
good.
final call for questions. And again, this way I put in the registration link for convention, as well as our sheet with more on it, and the full schedule's on there. Oh, we've got a question. Thank you, Liz. What other countries have been using imaging in their high performance training?
Carol, you would know this better than I.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We trained coaches from around the world, basically from India to Brazil, with Europe and America and in between. Specific athletes will be obviously Great Britain, Denmark, yeah, it's probably a few more, but Lithuania, I believe. So yeah, it's definitely Europe and America based at the moment. However, as we said, we already trained few coaches from around the world, so that number of countries of athletes is going to definitely increase.
Well, I don't see any more questions. Carol and Joe, do you want to give any like final, maybe, you know, what's going to be, you know, final thoughts? Or wait, there's the question. There's the question. Here it comes. All right, from Heather. How do high schoolers react to this kind of talk? If I went down that road, I would get a few looks and maybe even laughs. Is there a way to acclimate them?
I find high schoolers, like when I first moved to Miami, so my license didn't transfer from New York, social work. So I worked with like gang kids in Miami, kids who could eat me for lunch. And MI, motivational interviewing, works like so well with high schoolers because of any group of people. Nobody wants to be told what to do, but nobody wants to be less inclined to do what they're told than a high schooler. So the method that we brought together, the motivational interviewing and the imagery, is like ideal for high schoolers. Would you agree, Carol?
Absolutely. Just last Friday, I worked with a few athletes from high school here who are on, basically the shared goal was Paris 2024 and qualifying, and just easing them into this method is definitely the way to help them to see what they want and discuss what they want, but also then be able to imagine what they want to do and how they're going to do it. So it's definitely applicable, and it obviously has to have some adaptation to work with non-adults, But it just needs to be more more adaptation towards, you know, time to think and you know, that maturity level of high schoolers.
So what I'm hearing is that it doesn't need a lot of adaptation.
Not really, no. It's almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
I think the adaptation
Mm-hmm.
that has to happen is from us, right? Because we're
Mm.
used to fixing it, or we're used to being the authority, or we're used to talking to young people a certain way. So really the adaptation is within us.
Yeah, and actually what you might experience is that fresh air for them is that they can speak about those things. They can decide. They have the authority over their decisions and over their imagery.
Mm-hmm. And then I think we have a couple of questions. I'm going to go a little out of order here just to go with what we're talking right now. So for athletes that may struggle with sitting through longer imagery, even the length of the pool example earlier, are there quicker, shorter steps to work up to full imagery that are still effective?
Yeah, we teach imagery as a habit, and we start where the client is, right? So, you know, it could be, it doesn't have to be long. It's not like meditation where you want to do like 20 minutes of imagery. It could be, you know, 30 seconds, and you can build.
All right, I'll go back to this other one that was asked. I'm wondering if using imagery coaching would help with an adult learn to row participant who has a real difficulty with spatial relations and sequencing. For example, he doesn't trust where his oars are during the stroke process.
I think
Again,
so.
yes. Yeah.
And how would you approach working with that athlete?
So to build the trust of the movement, we would then focus on the multi-sensory approach of that very specific motion and that very specific feeling. You know, as myself, as I remember my rowing days, it's all about the trust that you have. And when you close your eyes, you trust that your hands are on the right height and your oar is in the right place because you trust your hand placement. So definitely bring the multi-sensory approach towards that motion and that trust of the proprioception and general feeling of the within the body and their hands and the back and everything else.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, we've got 2 minutes left. So do you guys want to finish with maybe some final thoughts and maybe what people can expect? You know, if they come to it's a 2-hour block during convention on the Wednesday that we'll be doing this. And, you know, the hope is that, you know, that 2-hour block we'll get a little bit further into this. Do you want to give them a little bit more of a preview and some final thoughts?
Sure. Karol, you want to go first?
Absolutely. So as we said, it's just a preview. It's everything we were able to deliver in a very interactive way in this very short hour, which actually went absolutely flying. And there's so many elements to everything we do and so many skills that we want to teach. So this is very much a preview in the very essence of it.
Yeah, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. And I would just encourage you to come and to, you know, what you'll be able to experience is actually like practicing. So today you heard some of the theory, some of the research. If you're into research, we can like swamp you with it. If you want more evidence, there's a ton of it. But if you really, I learned by doing, so you'll have the ability to go into breakout rooms to practice this and to get a feel for it. And we found, you know, even in just the book proposal, sending the book agent, she said, just reading this has changed my tennis game. And that's why I decided to sign you guys on. So it doesn't take much to have an impact once you understand this. There's refining, as Carrie knows, there's refining and there's our own insecurity about am I doing it right? But it's in doing it that we realize, oh, this works. I want to know more. So we just invite you to come along on this journey, be early adapters in our tribe. USRowing is and Harvard are our two partners here. We will be expanding to IBM in next year, but it's super exciting. We'd love to have you join us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and actually I said the wrong day. I forgot the imagery training will be Friday, which is the 10th of December. And the slot goes from 12:45 to 3 o'clock, and there'll be at least one 15-minute break in there. But Joe, Karol, thank you so much for giving us a little clue as to what is coming to convention this year. I think we really wanted to do this because we wanted to make sure that people understood what it was. Because I think, as we've seen with Carrie and also Malcolm Dalter, another level 3 coach that's gone through it, when you commit to it and you decide you're going to give it a chance, it's pretty incredible. So we're really excited to bring this to our membership and to all of our coaches. So thank you so much for your time, especially you, Karol. It's so late there. You're a trooper. But yeah, if this piqued your interest, we'd love to see you at convention. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I guess we will say good night.